Good morning. Today I'm going to talk a little bit about substitute addictions and the role that they play in recovery for some people. Looking again at Staying Sober by Gorski and Miller. And so they talk about substitute addictions and say changing from one addiction to another is not full recovery. If you believe that you can safely use large amounts of nicotine and caffeine, smoke marijuana, use diet pills or over-the-counter sleep aids, as long as you are not using alcohol or other drugs, you are in high risk of developing a second addiction. And so I want to talk a little bit about this because there may be some unpopular ideas in there. The one about caffeine is particularly unpopular with yours truly, and but also tell a little bit about my story and how developing a second addiction played a role in my eventual recovery. So I have always been a fan of both alcohol and marijuana. Those were my two primary drugs. Actually, three. I also loved cigarettes. And so for about 15 years, those three drugs were my little triumvirate. They were my powerhouse that I used all the time. And at one point, I really stopped liking marijuana because it was creating a lot of anxiety for me, and I couldn't seem to use it without getting very nervous and anxious unless I was really drunk. And so I went without it for a while, and then something happened, and I'm still not sure what, that I was able to start using it again without producing those effects. So when I got to the point where, and I was always of the opinion that marijuana was a drug that had gotten a bad rap because of primarily political and racial motivation from people who didn't want it to be popularized, and also commercial motivation as well from people who felt it endangered their own commercial ventures. And so I felt like it had gotten an unnecessary bad rap, and there wasn't any problem with using it, even in the large amounts that I was using it. You know, I never really thought about the fact that there's a difference between using it occasionally for recreation every now and then, and the addictive way in which I was using it. Never really thought about those two things. So when I quit drinking, I told myself I had long quit smoking cigarettes. I quit smoking cigarettes in 2014, and in 2017 is when I decided to quit drinking. And I stopped drinking on May 12th, 2017. And at that point, I told myself, you know, I'm fine to keep smoking pot. That's not a big deal. I will keep smoking pot. And as long as, and I said this to myself so many times, as long as I've got pot and can get high, then I'll be okay. I'm not worried. I won't ever have to drink again, that kind of thing. And for about 3 years, you know, I did not drink. In fact, I have not had a drink since May 12th, 2017. But what I found was that very quickly, the addictive tendencies that I displayed when I was using alcohol got mirrored in my pot use. And that happened so fast that in the first week that I was abstaining from alcohol, I remember smoking pot and thinking, I wonder if I'm going to have to quit this too at some point. And what ended up happening was that I was not doing any kind of recovery program. I was just abstaining from alcohol. So in a sense, I was a dry drunk who was getting high all the time. And my addictive use of marijuana continued to spiral downward and downward, and I was using more and more and more, to the point where it was causing some extreme emotional problems for me, and I was was seeing a psychiatrist who did not know the full extent of my use of marijuana. And actually, at one point, based on the symptoms I was describing to her, she diagnosed me with bipolar disorder. Now, I've come to believe that a lot of the symptoms that I was experiencing that looked like bipolar disorder were due to a combination of my untreated addiction and my insane amount of marijuana use. And those two things combined really led to a lot of the symptoms that I was experiencing that got me that diagnosis. That being said, I ended up in a place where I was just as depressed and down and out, and even in a much more fragile mental state than I was when I when I stopped drinking. And so that's what led me to rehab, was getting to the point with my marijuana addiction that I was just at the same place that I had been 3 years before when I decided I needed to stop drinking. So when I went into rehab, I told people I was there for marijuana, but I've since come to the understanding that that's not what I was there for. And I wasn't there to treat alcoholism. I was there to treat addiction in general. So what is addiction? What happens now? I get out of rehab, and the only drug available to me that is not only safe to use but is encouraged in meetings that we go to, and you even have service related to making the coffee. And so coffee I've always been a coffee drinker. It's something that's always been a part of my life. So I started to get addicted to coffee. And I have really thrown myself into this. I love coffee. I have coffees from all over the country. I started learning how to roast my own coffee at one point. And I've often wondered, is this too a mood altering drug that I need to cut out of my life? And I don't know the answer yet, but Gorski and Miller would say yes, it is. They say at the end of this chapter, they talk about the role of caffeine in addiction, and they say caffeine seems to contribute to relapse in the following way. Heavy caffeine users suffer from caffeine-related anxiety, stress, irritability, and overreaction. They do not know that these symptoms are caused by caffeine, so they fear something more serious may be happening to them. The overreaction causes situational problems and also prevents them from coping rationally with problems as they develop. The end result is increased problems, anger, and frustration that increase the risk of relapse. As the relationship between heavy caffeine use and relapse is becoming more well known, our understanding of what a mood-altering drug is has expanded to include drugs such as caffeine and nicotine that were previously considered harmless to recovery. So when I read that this morning, I thought, man, that sucks, because I really, really enjoy coffee. But it got me thinking, and I don't know what the answer is yet, and I can tell you that right now I do not want to quit drinking coffee. But it brought to mind just the relationship between what I experienced when I was going into my pot use after drinking, and how quickly that escalated to a full-blown addiction. And just reminded me that, with the addictive mind, any chemical we introduce, we're going to tend to use it irresponsibly and in ways that we try to use it to decrease pain. And the use of chemicals to decrease pain is only going to be a temporary relief for us, and it's going to lead to increased pain later. So lots of food for thought there for me. I'll think about it while I drink coffee. I'm going to be honest. I'm not going to Not going to lie about that. But if I do decide to cut coffee out of my life, I'll be back here to tell you about it, tell you about why, and tell you about what difference it made in my life. Until then, hope you guys have a great day, and I'll see you back here tomorrow.